Welcome to another episode of Ritual of Wild. Thank you so much for being here. On today's episode, I get to share a conversation with you that felt like an answered living prayer. My guest today is the awesome Neale Donald Walsch. So much of what I bring into these conversations is born from my own everyday life experience. Whether it's asking bigger questions or exploring something I'm moving through, the thresholds I'm meeting, and the quiet initiations that come with being human. Each guest has felt like a mirror, which has been like a soul aligned spark that invites a deeper conversation into a story that they have moved through within themselves and that hopefully you can connect with as well. With Neale, it was something really beautiful to speak with the author of Conversations with God, and a series that first found me in my 20s at a time when everything was changing was both surreal and felt like it was full circle. If you had told me back then that one day we'd be in conversation, I wouldn't have believed you, but life is really funny like that and can be wildly generous when we're open to it. Neale is the author of another book that I love called Home with God in a Life That Never Ends. And he's written 40 books on contemporary spirituality and its practical application in everyday life, including his new book, God Talk: Experiences of Humanity's Connections with a Higher Power, a book in the Common Sentience book series. Neale is the best-selling author of Conversations of God, a series which 7 of the 9 books made the New York Times bestsellers list. Book 1 remained on that list for 134 weeks. His titles have been translated into 37 languages and have been read by millions of people around the world. If you have read any of Neale's Conversations with God series, then you might know what I'm talking about when it stirs up a lot of bigger questions within yourself. Lately, I have been asking these bigger questions, and maybe you have too. This conversation felt like an answer to some of those explorations within myself, or at least a soft nudge towards the ones that live inside all of us. Neale's story is full of depth and honesty and spirit and a surprising dose of humor. You'll see his personality shine through our conversation, and I truly hope your heart receives something from this beautiful offering as much as I know mine did. So much so that when I had a list prepared of all the themes I wanted to explore from Home with God, we didn't get to any of it because I was so enthralled by the conversation that we were already having. And to be frank, we didn't need to get to it because I trust that the nectar that Neale shares will be something that you can connect with in your own way. Thank you again so much for being here. And please like, share, and subscribe to Ritual of Wild. You can support my channel by liking this if you're watching it on YouTube, or if you're listening to this on Spotify, going into Ritual of Wild and giving me 5 stars at the reviews at the top left of the screen under my Ritual of Wild name. Thank you again so much for being here. I appreciate your time and I appreciate you. Without further ado, here is my conversation with Neale Donald Walsch. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Ritual of Wild. Today, I have the honor of speaking with Mr. Neale Donald Walsch. Neale, it is such a hand over heart honor to speak with you. I'm nervous. I'm really excited to be in your company and sharing your most precious resource of time. I have my book, Home with God, here with me that completely obliterated my mind from who I was before I read it. And I'm really excited to have you here and explore some of the themes of this book and maybe dive into a little bit of conversations with God as well as what feels alive for you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Those are sweet things to say, and I'm honored to be here with you as well. It's wonderful to spend this time with you. How may I serve you?
Thank you so much. Well, I am a mother of 2 young souls, 4 and 2. And since becoming a mother, I have had a lot of questions about God. And I was raised Catholic, but I feel like the teachings I had of God was about this proverbial white man that lived in the sky, and then we get punished if we sinned or had premarital sex or, you know, broke any of the Ten Commandments, that we were going to burn in hell. And so a lot of the experience I had of God when I was younger is so different from the woman that I am today, and different in a beautiful way, in that the God that I feel that I'm cultivating this relationship really welcomes my wholeness and all it has to bring. Because I'm not sure if you're a parent, Neil, but as a mother, it can pulverize your heart into a million pieces to rearrange it into whom you are meant to be in the most beautiful and expansive way. And with that comes a lot of, I guess, putting things back in their rightful places, but as a remembering of who I truly am versus who I thought I needed to be in relationship with God. So I would love to know what you might have to say to that in
Well,
terms
let me
of.
let me begin before you go any further uh, by saying, yes, I am a parent.
Mm,
I have 9 children.
what? That's amazing.
Yes,
Wow.
including, well, I had 6 and then triplets upped the ante, as they say in the
Wow.
poker game. So all of a sudden I went from 6 to 9 virtually overnight.
Oh my
But
goodness.
I want to share something with you about the Catholic teaching,
Hmm.
because I also was raised a Catholic, as you may know. And so I understand the Catholic theology extremely well because I studied it deeply.
Hmm.
I'm not defending Catholicism because there's much about the doctrines that I don't fully agree with, but I do want to make it clear to anyone who might have heard your opening remarks that yes, the Catholic doctrine says that you will be sent to hell if you commit certain sins, sex before marriage, or stealing someone's life savings, or whatever someone might do, even swearing or saying the wrong thing. However, to be fair to the Catholic doctrine, it says that that only occurs if you die with that sin on your soul. That is, if you fail to confess it to a priest and receive absolution from
Hmm.
the priest and perform the penance that the priest gives you. And the penance is usually something really simple. Say 3 Our Fathers, 3 Hail Marys, and 3 Glory Bees, and you're given absolution. So I don't want people to think that the Catholic Church is talking about a God who is such a tyrant
Hmm.
that he offers no way to step away from our own offenses.
Hmm.
Now, I don't agree with much of the doctrine of the Catholic Church or even Christianity more broadly, the Methodist Church, the Lutheran Church, the Baptist Church. I don't think there's only one pathway to God, and I
Yeah.
don't agree. I don't agree with the point of view that says that if you're not coming to God in a certain way or through a certain doorway, that then you are going to everlasting damnation in hell. I
Hmm.
don't think that's the God of my understanding. That's not the God. The God of my understanding is not transactional. She
Hmm.
doesn't think of love as a transaction, like a trade deal between nations. I'll
You're
give you
right.
this if you give me that, and if you don't give me what I want, then I won't give you what you want. So
Hmm.
that's not my understanding of who and what God is. I think that God is the embodiment and the expression of pure love,
Mm.
which needs, expects, requires, and demands nothing in return.
Mm.
We can't even love the person on the pillow next to us that way.
Mm.
Much
Yeah.
less can we imagine a God who loves us that way. And the reason that it's hard for us to love the person on the pillow next to us that way is because we've been taught that God loves us as a transaction. Give me what I want, and I'll give you what you want.
It's so true.
I
It's so
know,
true. And noticing how the world around us right now, I feel like relationships are very transactional.
yes,
And
that's
it
very sad.
seems it seems to lack this element of engagement, meeting each other with wonder and bringing in our differences a little bit closer so as to deepen what is on the other side of them versus shoulding each other, or I'm right and I'm wrong, which seems to perpetuate this microcosm of the virus of war and divisiveness.
I agree with you. You know what I say to my wife at least once a day, if not more often? When I
What's
look
that?
at her, I say, I love what I see, not what I get.
Hmm. It's so beautiful.
I love you because of what I see over there, because of who you are, not because of what I get from you.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've made it very clear that my love for my darling is not a transaction.
Yeah. And that must be such a beautiful thing to anchor into as you raise nine, I imagine grown lives now who maybe even have their own children.
Yes, they do, and they're all, of course, grown human beings in their 30s, 40s, or 50s.
Mm.
So yes, I have, some wonderful grandchildren, um, 7 wonderful grandchildren in all so far.
Wow.
And so I've been very blessed in my life. But yes, I think that the children and their children have come to understand that God is not a tyrant,
Mm-hmm.
and God is not a deal maker. She doesn't say, this for that. It's not a quid pro quo. It's not a bargain. I think that God loves us without needing anything in return.
Yeah.
And if I'm wrong about that, I guess, okay, then I guess I'm going to hell.
I'm wondering if you believe in a hell, but I think I know the answer based on the books that I've read that you've written.
Um, I think losing at poker comes close to it. But other than that, no, I don't believe in an experience called hell,
Mm.
because I don't believe that a God of pure love would create or even allow such an experience.
Mm-hmm.
I can't imagine that God would do that. So, yeah, and I think that, it's really clear. You know what God said to me in my conversations with God? Neale, sweetheart, understanding replaces forgiveness in the
Mm-hmm.
mind of the master.
Mm.
So we don't even have to forgive. I often get lots of strange looks when I give a talk in a church, but sometimes I'm invited to speak, for a little bit at a church meeting. And I will say to my audience, I'll say to the congregation, God will never forgive you for anything. Just understand that clearly. God does not and will not ever forgive you for anything. And people go crazy. I mean, their eyes cross in the first row. Sometimes they get up out of the pews and actually walk out of the church. One of these weirdos. Well, I say, well, wait, at least give me a chance to explain. God doesn't forgive anybody for anything because God has no need to. God is the highest power in the universe. You cannot injure, hurt, harm, damage, frustrate, or anger God in any way, any
Mm.
more than any more than your 2-year-old child could
Right.
hurt or anger or frustrate you to the point where you feel you have to forgive. If a 2-year-old child spills the milk at her birthday party because she's so excited and she spills the glass of milk and knocks it over, Grandpa doesn't say, "It's okay, sweetheart. I forgive you."
Right.
Because Grandpa understands that forgiveness is not even part of the equation. Grandpa understands how a 2-year-old could do such a thing. And
Mm-hmm.
God understands how human beings, most of whom are acting like 2-year-olds, could do what they're doing. And
Yeah.
understanding replaces forgiveness in the mind of the divine.
That's that's really big to receive. I've never conceptualized it that way.
Neither did I until had my conversations with God when she said, Neale, sweetheart, you've got me all wrong.
Mm.
That's what I was asked, by the way. I was doing the Today Show, which is a major television program in the United States, and millions of people watch the Today Show. And the host asked me, he was interviewing me, and he said, "What's God's most important message to the world?
Mm,
You claim to be talking to God. You claim God is talking to you. So tell us what you think is God's most important message to the world." I hadn't really thought about the question in quite such specific terms. So I felt really on the spot. I'm on this national television program,
mhm.
but suddenly it came to me. I said, I can tell it to you in 5 words. God's most important message to the world in 5 words.
Tell me.
You've got me all wrong.
Mm,
You've got me all wrong. And I said to the host, now, if that message is inaccurate, our conversation is over. If
mhm.
that message is accurate, our conversation has just begun. What we've got wrong about God is that God's relationship with humanity is not transactional.
Right.
It's as simple as that.
Which I feel like for so many people would be really hard to digest. And so I'm curious for you, maybe in that moment during that interview when you received that, or maybe it was the intersection of your own life through which you thought, you know what, I got some questions for you, God. And then all of a sudden receiving a channel of all of this beautiful wisdom that you've shared in the books. I'm curious for you, what was that moment that you knew you wanted to sit down and have these conversations? Because I feel like I have always been raised with God in my life, but I never was taught how to receive God in my life. I was just told how, and I was told about God, but I was not really taught to cultivate that relationship. And to honor my parents, they raised us going to church every Sunday and they would talk about God and things like that. And so they led like a very beautiful example, but I could not understand in my own life experience. It was really the landing for me was becoming a mother and like deciding to become a mother, conception and all of that. And I got chills and like I feel like when I'm in the presence of pure love, I get really emotional. I can feel myself like my eyes are tearing up a little bit. But I'm curious for you, what was that moment like to know that, I want to learn deeper and I want to share it with the world?
Well, first of all, the two ideas did not come at the same time. I
True.
want to
Yeah.
learn deeper was one idea, and I want to share it with the world came like 3 or 4 years later. It never
Okay.
occurred to me. Um, I need you to know, Jennifer, that when I had my first conversation with God, I wasn't thinking about writing a book. As a
Mm,
matter of fact, I never thought anybody in the whole world, not even my partner, would know what was going on. It was such a sacred experience that I would never share it with anybody. I was simply having a sacred internal dialogue, which I wound up taking notes on my yellow legal pad because I didn't want to forget what I was hearing. I just didn't want to forget what I was being told. But I never thought in 1,000 years that anyone would ever see my handwritten notes.
right.
And so how I felt to answer your first question is just as you described. I had tears in my eyes,
Hmm.
and the tears were running down my face, but not tears of sadness, tears of immense joy, tears of joy that I had found a God that I could love. I'll never forget one of the first things that was said to me by a member of the public after the book did come out, which was years later. But I remember a reader actually said to me those words. She said, "Thank you for introducing me to a God I could fall in love with."
Hmm.
But I have to say, to repeat myself, I never imagined that I was writing a book. I was
Right.
simply asking questions of my deepest inner self, which is where I believe God resides.
Hmm.
God is not way up there somewhere up in the clouds,
Right.
but deep, deep within every sentient being in the universe, in my understanding. So I was not calling God down. I was calling God forth, calling
Mhm.
forth the wisdom that resides within every sentient being, in my understanding. But it never occurred to me, as I said, that anyone else would ever see this until I was told, actually in the dialogue,
Oh,
Neale,
really?
yes, I was told in the dialogue, Neale, you will make of this one day a book,
Mm.
and it will be accessed by many people. And you know what I thought? We'll see about that. I really said, thank you, God, for giving me, that piece of information, because if this really is you, we'll see if that's going to happen. Because no one, first of all, no publisher is going to publish a book because some guy up in Oregon claims to be talking to God. It's
Right.
not going to happen. And even if a publisher was crazy enough to put the book out, nobody's going to buy it. I
Mm.
mean, maybe my relatives and friends might sell 35 copies, but it's not going to, I mean, because people are not going to rush out and buy a book because some guy claims that God is talking to him. Come on, it's not going to happen. So I sent it, honestly, I sent, I went to a Xerox copying place and Xeroxed all of my handwritten notes and sent them to a publisher, a small publisher on the East Coast of the United States, just to dare God. I thought, okay, if this really is you, and you told me it's going to be a book that will be accessed by many people, show me.
Mm.
And I sent it to two or three small publishers. And that small publisher on the East Coast called me about 2 weeks later and said, you know what? We love this material.
Mm.
We're going to put this book out.
Wow.
I said, you're kidding me. Really? Yeah, the guy said, no, it's a great work of fiction about a guy who has an angry guy who has an argument with God. He said, wait a minute. You're not publishing this as a book of fiction. And the man said to me on the phone, Mr. Walsh, are you trying to tell me you think this actually happened to you? We thought you were writing a novel about a guy who argues with God. I said, no, 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 no. This is a nonfiction book, or it's not going to be published. And the publisher said, well, okay, we'll put it out as a nonfiction book, but you're not going to find 500 readers because nobody's going to rush out to buy a book because some guy claims to be talking to God. It's not going to happen.
Right.
And you know what? He was right. The book did not find 500 readers. It found 5 million
Yeah.
in 37 languages,
That's crazy.
published around the world. Not bragging, just saying.
Yeah, I was in my 20s when I read the first Conversations with God. I don't even know how I found it, but I'm really glad I did because I want to circle back to the part where you said this woman said to you, "Thank you for writing about a God I could fall in love with." And these tears that you see flowing through me feels like a reflection of what her message is, but also naming that in my experience of this God, I've learned to fall in love with myself as a human and welcome her whole and home. And yeah, it just it overwhelms me with this love because I'm a mother and I know what that means for my children, and what I'm going to teach, how I teach them who God is. And it just feels it feels so big and
Not only
beautiful.
this, but not only this, because you know how you feel about your children, you must know how God feels about her children. And we are
Right.
all sons and daughters of God.
Hmm.
And that's what I was realizing after my conversation. There's not just one son of God. Even the person who said he was a son of God, that guy back there named Jesus,
Right.
even Jesus said to his followers, to his disciples, he said, why are you so amazed? These things and more shall you do also.
Hmm. Yeah, Neil, and I'm wondering, but how do you explain that to someone in tremendous loss? And I remember some of this, and I was really moved by some of the conversations within the conversations in Home with God, like the mother who adopted the boy and he got into that motorcycle accident when he turned 18. I don't know if you remember her in the book,
Yes.
but she came to one of your talks and she had a question for God, but really I think you were taken by her question because she was like, "Well, if you talk to God, you tell him I'm bloody angry with him, like tell me why this happened." Because they were trying to conceive for 5 years and then, they decided to adopt and then this boy, spoiler alert if anyone's listening and hasn't read the book yet, but he ends up having a motorcycle accident when he's 18 and she says like tell me what of a God then, like why would this happen if God loves us all. And so in relation to that story, any parent that has faced that tremendous loss where the state of the world right now is just a little bit wild and crazy. And in Home with God, we speak about how everyone is doing everything for themselves. But how do you explain that to someone that is not in relationship with God and is just face that incredible loss?
Well, Jennifer, it's important for me to not try to convince anyone of anything.
Mm-hmm.
How do I explain it? I explain it the way it was explained to me in
Mm-hmm.
conversations with God. And then I share with whoever I'm talking to, whether it's one other person or an audience of 50 or 60 people or whatever. I just say to them, I'm not trying to convince you of anything.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't believe what I have to share with you, then toss it out, throw it away. But if it makes sense to your soul, or if it causes you to want to have your own
Mm-hmm.
conversation with God, then allow yourself to do that. Because I was told, of course, that we are all capable of having our own conversation with God. And in fact, we all are having our own conversation with God all the time. We're simply calling it something else:
Right.
women's intuition,
Mm.
or a psychic hit, or an epiphany,
Right.
or a brilliant idea, you or I had an inspiration, the other day, an inspiration. So we call it different words because we don't want to actually say, I had a conversation with God,
Right.
because we don't want to be marginalized or, ridiculed, which I have experienced being both marginalized and ridiculed, and that's
Right.
okay. I totally understand. I understand how people could believe that what I'm saying is totally crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But I believe that, as we are told in Home with God, nobody dies at a time or in a way that is not of their choosing.
Mm.
And that's what I shared with this mother whose son died when he was 18
Mm-hmm.
in a motorcycle accident. Nobody dies at a time or in a way that's not of their choosing. They couldn't, because if they really are a soul, if they're not a body or a mind,
Mm-hmm.
but a soul, a spiritual entity, an individuation of divinity, nothing can happen to an individuation of divinity that individual expression does not choose.
Mm.
And so the question then becomes, every thinking person would then, why would they choose that? Why would they choose to experience their departure from physical life in that way?
Right.
And I have to say, I don't have an answer to that. I couldn't possibly begin to go into someone else's soul and try to explain why they made that decision.
Mm.
But there are many possibilities that occur to me, including maybe that the soul worked with your soul to bring you to a larger understanding of the experience called death.
Mm.
Because I asked God, what is death?
Yeah.
Explain it to me. And he said, Neale, Death is simply a change of address.
Hmm.
You've just a change of venue. You've just gone to a different place. You cannot die. You simply begin expressing life in a different form, in a form that you have adopted before, which you would call the realm of the spiritual. So you become a spiritual being once again, and you may choose to reincarnate over and over again if you wish, in order to continue the process that we would loosely call evolution. But I was told that death does not exist.
Mm.
And you know what's interesting is that every one of the major religions of the world, and oh, and by the way, there are 4,000 religions now being practiced on the earth.
That's
I
that's a
didn't make
lot of
that
religion.
number up. Yeah, I didn't make that number up. You can Google that. How
Yeah, I
many
had no idea.
religions are there on the face of the earth? And the answer comes back 4,223.
Wow.
But most of the world's major religions teach that life is eternal.
Hmm.
And I want to share, then I shared with that lady what my mom said to me in some of her final words to me. She was in the intensive care ward of the hospital. Everyone knew that she didn't have much longer to live, just a matter of hours, really, possibly a day or two. She knew it, the doctors knew it, the family knew it. And each of us had 5 minutes to spend with her alone. And in my final 5 minutes with my mother alone, just her and me, she's lying in the bed. I'm sitting next to her. She looked at me and she said, "Sweetheart, promise me two things." I said, "Yes, Mom, yes, whatever you want." She said, "First of all, take care of your father. He's a good man. Take care of him. Promise me you'll make sure that he feels loved and cared for in my absence." I said, "Absolutely." And then she said, "And then keep this second promise. Dance on my grave." I said, "What?" She said, "Sweetheart." She said, "Sweetheart, I know where I'm going. I know where I'm going. It's okay. Celebrate. Celebrate the life we had together and the life I'm going to now." And you know what I did? I actually went to her grave months later, which was in a whole different state. I flew across the country to her gravesite. When I got there, I looked both ways to make sure no one was watching because they would think I was being totally sacrilegious. And when the coast was clear, I did a little soft shoe, a little tap dance on her grave. I said to her, "In celebration, Mom, in celebration. I know that right now you're home with God."
Mm.
So you know what? That's been my understanding since I had that dialogue with the divine. And I could be wrong about all of this. And if I can, I guess I'm going to hell. But as George Bernard Shaw noted a few years ago, all the interesting people are there anyway.
You say that again, all the interest in people.
George Bernard Shaw was asked about hell, and he said, all the interesting people are there anyway.
Oh, I see. Oh.
That's where all the interesting people are. They had such weird thoughts and such interesting ideas that they were sent to hell. Or
Yeah,
maybe we've made it all up.
yeah. Sometimes I think that hell is a personal hell in which we do make up. We are constrained by the stories and beliefs that were given to us, maybe, or that we were conditioned by. And um, I feel like since I've opened up my heart outrageously to God, my life has shifted dramatically. I mean, on an external level, not much is different about me, but internally, it just feels like there's a lot more space and freedom and possibility. And there's a question that you brought to an audience that I loved, and it's a question that I am going to be weaving into my life because it's a question I just learned yesterday. And that is, what does this have to do with my soul?
With the agenda of my soul,
With
yeah.
the agenda of my soul. And there's just something about the experience of life in which it just, you know, that saying that everyone says, like, would you die for your children? Well, then the question for me then becomes, am I willing to come all the way alive for my children? And am I willing to cultivate a life versus just being focused on making a living? Again, this transactional idea that life is about getting things and getting somewhere. When I shifted my perspective and openness to God and became curious, it just became a question of how present can I be with love and in this moment. And it's been very, very interesting. And it's not to say that, you know, chaos and conflict are obliterated. It just, when I meet those places, I just have a little bit more compassion. And, you know, I'm human, I still get triggered and can react, but I just have more wonder and curiosity about why those things show up. And I don't rush past it the way I used to before. I just really feel like I'm in the stewardship of a benevolent energy, God, that presence, and it's within me. It's really wild to say that. And you know, you were speaking about like you don't want to, when you were interested with God and at the beginning, or when you were dancing on your mother's grave and you don't want people to judge you or anything. Like when I started reading Conversations with God, I'd put the book down and like face down because I didn't want people to know I was reading about God. So I'd hide the title. And now I don't care. I just like proudly, if I'm at a coffee shop, it's almost like, yeah, I'm reading this awesome book. But it's really interesting to feel the weaving of the inner part that we don't always speak to.
I agree with everything you said. And, you know, you said something a moment ago about sometimes we wonder why are these things happening? Why did this happen? Or why did that happen?
Right.
And when I mentioned that to God in my dialogue, she said, Neale, the question why is the most irrelevant question in the universe.
Mm.
The question is not why did something happen? The question is, what do you want to make of it?
Mm-hmm.
Which is why I came up with that question that you brought up a moment ago. I
Mm-hmm.
call it life's magic question. Whenever anything negative happens in my life, whether it's a big thing, like as an example, about a year and a half ago, I really had my wife and I were driving down the road and we had a terrible automobile accident.
Mm.
Yeah, a semi tractor trailer truck banged into the back of our car.
Wow.
He got a ticket for following too close. But when he hit the back of our car, he threw us off the highway, through a guardrail into an open field,
Wow.
and the car was smashed to smithereens. It was amazing that my wife and I escaped with our lives. We couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
We had to crawl out of this crumpled mess of a car that was totaled, and we managed to escape without serious injury.
Mm.
Now, when
That's
bad things happen,
well,
yeah,
that's
it was
incredible that you had no
it,
serious injury.
no, we didn't. Not even a broken bone.
Wow.
But it was amazing because you know the airbags saved us.
Mm.
But my point that I was getting to is that when anything bad happens in my life, whether it's a major event like a car accident that almost kills you, or just a minor quarrel with your beloved wife across the kitchen, and we're just having a difference of opinion about something. Whether it's a big thing or a small thing, I ask the same question. wait a minute, wait a minute. What does this have to do with the agenda of my soul?
Mm.
That's a process that Conversations with God introduced me to. It's called recontextualization.
Mm.
It's when I contextualize or place within a new context exactly what's going on.
Right.
Even this interview that you're conducting so beautifully with me now,
Mm.
even this interview, I get to ask myself in the back of my mind, okay, what does this have to do with the agenda of my soul? And what's interesting about a question like that, whether it's in response to a positive event or a negative event, is that the answer always comes to me.
Mm.
It will always come to us. It becomes very clear. Oh, I see how this fits into the agenda of my soul. And the agenda of my soul is to announce and declare, to express and fulfill, to become and experience who I really am
Mm.
as an individuation of divinity. I'm not this. I'm not this. My body and my mind are simply tools, pieces of equipment
Yeah.
used by the spiritual being that people call a soul. That's who I am. And I came to the physical realm because this is one of the places in the universe. I mean, the earth is one of the places in the universe where that contextual field exists, where the opposite of who we are exists.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked God to explain that to me. And she said, Neale, let's use a simple example. How tall are you? I said, well, as you know, God, I'm 6 feet tall, exactly 6 feet tall. God said, okay, now supposing that every tree, every blade of grass, every building, every person, supposing that everything in the entire world was 6 feet tall precisely, supposing you lived in 6 foot tall world, how would you ever experience what it's like to be 6 feet tall?
Mm-hmm.
I said, gosh, I don't know. I would probably pray for something that would show up in my life that was taller or shorter. Then I could know the difference. And by observing the difference, I'd know what it's like to be 6 feet tall. God said, yes. And that's also what it's like to be the light.
Mm.
That's also what it's like to be an individuation of divinity. That's also what it's like to be the demonstration of pure love. That's what it's like. But when bad things happen to you, raise not your fist to heaven and curse the darkness not, but be a light unto the darkness,
Mm.
that you might know who you really are, and that all those whose lives you touch might know who they really are as well,
Yeah.
which, by the way, I notice is precisely what you are doing on podcasts like this.
Thank you. Thank you for
Wow.
thank you for sharing that. And that is precisely what I was thinking even before you said it. Just I get full chills even as I take that in. What a privilege and a sacred gift it is to co-steward these conversations with the lovely souls that sit on the other side of them and say yes to me, and just so open to what we can weave together, with our hearts wide open. It's to me, it's just like the best thing in the world besides my children. But in my lifetime, I'm 42. I just turned 42 last week, and I've left my body, almost left my body once that I know for sure, and a second time I had a very close call in the accident didn't transpire, but what happened in the in between felt like it was just so otherworldly. It felt like time slowed down, and it stretched out, and then someone came and stopped the cars from colliding. No one was there, but I felt someone there. And the first time was with the birthing of my daughter Leilani. We had a home birth, and then which was incredible. But then afterwards, my body just wouldn't birth the placenta, so I was hemorrhaging quite fast and too much that my body could handle. And I did go to some place. And in Home with God, there's several parts where you talk about we can choose to come back. And I'm curious for you, besides the accident that you had with your wife last year, if you experienced something like that. I know it goes a little bit into the quantum in Home with God. And I'm a student of clinical somatic therapy, and a big aspect of that is we look into the science, but as well the mystical and the quantum. And so I'm fascinated by it, because that is the place through which I deepened my relationship with God, and I came back with this living prayer of I just want to really teach women and mothers how to thrive and love on their bodies, because I was so close to losing mine and I knew what that felt like. Um, so it just feels like this service bigger than my fear of looking foolish doing it, you know? So I'm just like really diving into wanting to learn and steward those lessons for women and mothers and other humans too. But I'm curious for you if you could speak a little bit to the quantum, or that liminal space of, from your experience, of what happens between, the portal of, because death, there is no death. There is no death.
I agree. Jennifer, I had what people popularly call a near-death experience um, a few years ago. I was simply lying on my couch,
Hmm.
having a little midday nap, and for no apparent reason. I don't know why. I didn't have any pain or a heart attack or any kind of a physical, um, injury or physical incident. But for some reason, I simply left my body.
Mm.
And suddenly I found myself totally conscious, totally aware, looking down on my own body on the couch. And talk about a surreal experience.
Yeah.
Because, for the first few moments, I didn't know what was going on. And then I realized, oh my golly, I'm looking at myself. Oh my God, have I died? Have I died?
Mm.
Am I dead? What's what's going on? And then I turned, in a sense, I felt myself turning toward, I hate to be so predictable, but in fact, toward the light. There was a huge light, the biggest, warmest, brightest, most expansive, joyful light I had ever experienced in my life. And
Mm.
I felt myself being pulled into and drawn into the light. And when I was totally surrounded by it, and not just physically, not just visually surrounded, but emotionally, I could feel the warmth of that light.
Mhm.
And when I was totally surrounded by and embraced by the light, I heard a voice say to me, "You are my son, in
Mm.
whom I am well pleased. You do not have to remain here
Mm.
if you do not choose to." And I thought, who wouldn't want to stay here?
Mm.
I looked back down on my own body on the couch, and I thought, because he doesn't feel like he's quite done yet. There's a little bit more for him to do. I said, well, if I know I'm going to come back here next time, can you guarantee that I'm not missing my one chance? And God said to me, sweetheart, there's no other place to go. Of course you'll be back here.
Mm.
There's no other place to go except to go home with God. He said, okay, then I'll see you later. And I just swooped back into my body, and I woke up off the couch. I just kind of startled myself awake, like, I thought, wow, what a crazy dream I just had.
Hmm.
Only only later did I realize that it wasn't really a dream. It was an actual experience. My soul simply left my body
Hmm.
temporarily and took a little journey
That's
and
so
then returned
interesting. Go on, sorry, Neil.
and took a little journey and then returned. I had what people call an out of body experience.
Right. When I hear yours, that's very a little bit different from mine in that I don't think I was gone long enough to see the light, but whatever I felt like an emulation of like the most calm peace I had ever experienced in my life. And I was aware that I was losing so much blood. In fact, I said to my partner before it happened, because I had my baby, my newborn in my arms, and my husband on the other side of me, and I told him like I think I'm gonna take my last breath now. I just don't think I have anything left in me. And um, when I took that last breath, I entered this realm where um, I was aware, but I was somewhere else. And in that calm, a voice whispered to me, "It's not your time." And she sounded a little bit like me, but it was so audible, like you and I talking, you know? And I was told I was out for about 20 minutes before I came to. They didn't have to revive, like they didn't have to do the whole machine thing, but unconscious for 20 minutes. And when I woke up, there was like 20, like a lot of people, 15 to 20 people around me just trying to save my life. But it was just such an incredible experience. And through that space, I came back. I mean, still me, but just it was as if any filter through which I saw life before that limited the possibility of what I could create and experience shattered. And then I came back and there was space and possibility and just like deep awe and reverence for this body and humans and life and breath and like the privilege of feeling, even when the feeling is like really icky, you know? And I believe it's in the feeling that we are able to generate a sense of flow with life and God and creation. And aren't they all the same anyway? You know, like that's what I'm thinking is like life, God, and creation. It's all one. Like the God in what would a question I like to ask myself is like, what would the God in me do? Something I say to God every day is, show me the way. I don't know how to manage this, but could you show me the way if I just like get my mind out of the way and you could drop into my heart and I will hear you and I will feel you. And so that's what I consider my ND did for me, but I'm very grateful for what happened. I'm so happy that I'm still here because like you said, that sense of you still got a mission here to complete or work to do. I feel that's about myself too. And I could say as a human, I declare that to God. Like I'll say, like, I would love to be here a really long time and with hopefully the blessing of meeting my own grandchildren one day, though I started late, but you know, a mama can dream. But yeah, I appreciate you sharing your story because there are so many parts of it that I connect with, and I'm sure lots of listeners will as well.
When will you be finishing your book?
I would love to publish one in the next year. I'm actually starting one called The Beautiful Ruin, and it's just about the wild and the beauty and the ruin of motherhood and life, but meeting ourselves in it and through it, and not to compartmentalize the parts we want to escape, but rather deepen into them because there is nectar and wisdom there to teach us.
In
It
the
really
first
moves.
chapter, I'm going to give you the title of your first chapter,
Okay.
What It's Like to Die.
Wow.
Chapter 1, What It's Like to Die. And tell the story as you just told me
Okay.
in specific terms. And then go on from there to talk about the beautiful ruin and how you came. to a place of seeing that nothing is ever ruined.
Mm. I'll be sending you to write the forward, Neil. I I really love this conversation. Originally when I sat down, I had 10 quotes that I loved from Home with God, and I mean, we're 10 to 2 now, and I haven't even picked one because the conversation has been so beautiful and engaging. And so I want to thank you. But with the 10 minutes we have left, I want to honor your time. Maybe we could go over a couple of them and you can riff back at me how they
Whatever,
reflect.
whatever serves you. I'm
Okay,
here to serve you.
thank you. Okay, so the first quote that jumps out at me is the deepest secret is that life is not a process of discovery, but a process of creation. You are not discovering yourself, but creating yourself anew. And I wrote in brackets to ask you, I feel like life is also a remembering game. In your quote, you say we create yourself anew, but I also feel that everything I experience in this pure possibility and love is a literal remembering with who I truly am. I'd love to know how this applies and feels alive for you today.
I agree with every word you said.
Mm,
No, I don't think that I meant to infer that the process of creation means that everything you're creating is original
mm,
or a first time creation.
right,
Just because it's something we remember is not something that we're not creating. We're simply recreating it,
right.
which is why the name of my nonprofit foundation is called the Recreation Foundation
Mm,
for that very reason. So I agree with every word you've just spoken. We're not creating out of thin air. We're simply recreating what we have come to remember. I
mm,
agree with you.
beautiful. And another quote I loved um, is hope is the doorway to belief. Belief is the doorway to knowing, and knowing is the doorway to creation, and creation is the doorway to experience. Experience is the doorway to expression, and expression is the doorway to becoming, and becoming is the activity of all life and the only function of God.
Put perfectly. I have nothing to add to that. When that came through me, I just nodded my head and went, of course,
Mm,
absolute truth. That's the pathway from who we are to who we have chosen to be,
I
the
love that.
pathway from who we think we are or who we have mistaken ourselves to be to
Mm,
who we truly are. That's the only really big question in life. Life has only one major question. And life invites us to ask and answer the question in every moment.
mm,
Who am I? And
who
who
am
do I
I?
choose to be?
Yeah,
Okay, my wife and I are having a little spat. Who am I and who do I choose to be? Okay, I just won the lottery and I won $25,000. Who am I and who do I choose to be?
yeah.
Okay, I just had a car accident. And by the way, I'll never forget this moment. The man who smashed us off the highway, of course, he stopped naturally. He was in his truck. He pulled over. He realized he had made a horrible mistake. He was following us too closely and he rammed into us. But he rushed up to us. Are you okay? Are you guys all right? Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Are you all right?
Mm.
And my wife did something that I'll never forget. She said, "Can I give you a hug?" To the man who almost killed us. And she gave the man a hug and she said, "It's okay." So she said, "We all make mistakes. It's okay. Everybody is all right. The insurance will pay for the car. Don't worry about a thing."
Your wife sounds like an amazing woman.
That would be putting it mildly.
Yeah. What you shared with me reminds me of a quote that I love by a woman named Jane Clapp, who is a Jungian somatic practitioner. And she says, it takes the heart of a giant to love and to be loved. And so I can imagine the magnitude of resonance and pure love that your wife embodies. And it's just very beautiful to witness through your sharing of her.
Yes, she's a remarkable person and an extraordinary example of what it means to be an aspect of divinity. You know, what I said to her, because I met her, we met after the book had been out for about 12 or 13 years.
Mm.
And after meeting her, it was, by the way, it was love at first sight.
Yeah.
You know, we really did. We knew as soon as and we talked about it later on, we both confessed to each other, you know, as soon as I laid eyes on you, I knew you were, I knew you were the one that I was supposed to be with. That was 17 years ago. We've been married now 17 years. I met her
Wow.
when I was 63. I remember that I was 63 because I used to sing to her the Beatles song, Will You Love Me When I'm 64? But yeah, she's a remarkable human being. And what I've said to her over and over again is, you know what you've done for me? She says, no, what, sweetheart? I said, you've proven to me that the message of conversations with God
Mm.
is real, is true, and that I can rely on it
Mm.
because you've walked into my life as a living demonstration of the grandest expression found in those books. I couldn't even find it in myself. I'm not a walking model of what I've brought through. But I said to my sweetheart, but darling, you are. You are the walking model. You know, the kind of person she is, let me tell you, she'll take 20 minutes to save a spider's life. If she sees a spider on the kitchen counter,
Mm.
instead of just doing away with it, she
Yeah.
grabs it, she grabs a glass, puts the glass over the spider. If she can manage to catch him, she finally does. Then she gets a piece of cardboard and puts it under the glass. Then she'll carry it outside and asks me to open the door because she needs another hand. I open the door and she goes outside and puts the spider down on a leaf on a plant outside. And she says, sweetheart, go home and have a good life.
Aw.
And she comes back in and I look at her and I say, that's why I love you,
That's very sweet.
because you're the kind of person who would spend 15 minutes to save the life of us.
And in that 15 minutes is a reflection of that pure love.
Of
With
course, yes.
I would love to ask you one final question, if that's all right.
Yes.
And that question is, to the Neale I'm speaking with today, with all of the wisdom and the tapestry of life through which you weave through your books, and maybe even your marriage with your lovely wife and your 9 children and your 7 grandchildren, what would this Neale today tell the Neale that was at the intersection of writing Conversations with God all those years ago? What piece of wisdom would you offer him to the Neale that doubted or was like, show me, God, come on?
So listen, I would offer is there's more going on here than meets the eye.
Mm.
Look deeply at every moment of your life, and you see that there's more going on here than meets the eye.
Mm.
Or as Bill said, Bill, I thought Bill put it perfectly. Bill said, to be or not to be. That is the question.
Bill.
Whether it is nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to rise up against a sea of troubles, and by opposing to end them, to
Mm.
die, to sleep, to sleep, perchance to dream. There's the rub. For in that sleep of death, what dreams may come,
Mm-hmm.
and we have shuffled off this mortal coil. So I would say to a person, what I would say to myself, I had a dream once where I was talking to my 21-year-old self.
Your 21-year-old self?
Yeah, I was talking to my 21-year-old self in the dream. I
Mm.
had come to him and I said to him, Al, there's more going on here than meets the eye.
Mm.
Look deeply into each moment and search for what you can find. The treasure is waiting for you there. Each moment is an opportunity for you to announce and declare, express and fulfill, become and experience who you really are. But first, you must know that.
Mm-hmm.
And once you do, your life will become an adventure, the likes of which you could never have imagined.
It's a beautiful, beautiful message to end our conversation on. Thank you so much, Neale, for being here with me. This felt like 5 seconds. I can't believe an hour has gone by. And is there any way, or could you share the ways that we can find you to work with you or
Of
connect
course,
more deeply with your work that is ongoing?
if anyone is wanting to stay connected with the message of Conversations with God, which I call CWG, Conversations with God, just go to cwgconnect.com.
Okay,
cwgconnect.com will put you in touch with me. And there I interact personally, one-on-one with people every day of my life.
beautiful. Thank you
By the
again.
way,
Oh,
here's God's uh, message to the world to close our interview with, our time together with, is this.
mm,
I said to God, tell me one thing that could really help me move into the life I was designed to live. And God said, okay, Neale, here it is. Write this down. Neale, your life is not about you. It's about everyone whose life you touch
mhm,
and the way in which you touch it. But when you understand that, then you will realize that in a universal sense, your life is about you for an elegant reason. There's only one of us in the room.
mhm.
There's nobody else here. I know it looks like Jennifer and Neale are two different beings, but we are all one.
Thank you, Neale. It's so beautiful. It was an honor to be in this space with you. I really just feel like I'm going to really take time to integrate everything we shared, and it was truly an honor to connect with you this day.
And vice versa. It was an honor to share this time with you as well. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, it was my honor and pleasure.